Hello and welcome to our Midweek Conversation with First Baptist Sweetwater, where we strive to be the first responders of God's love. I'm interim pastor Jerry Hendricks, along with my former associate, T. Hamilton.
I can still be an associate.
Yeah, but I said my former associate. I mean, we're not associates anymore. Maybe we are.
Yeah, we are.
Okay, good
We're
point.
still getting checks from the same place.
Good point.
At what point are you going to start calling me assistant to the interim pastor?
In next week's podcast. This is my first podcast as interim pastor, and I'm looking forward to this.
It's your second.
Podcast as interim pastor?
Midweek podcast, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, last week was your first one.
I sit corrected.
That's all right.
Anyways, thank you.
So we're two in.
Well, actually, I've not assumed any role as as interim yet, have I?
I mean, you seem to be doing it.
Stop it.
You're doing a podcast. That's part of it.
Good. So that's what I want to talk about.
Should we start over or are we good to
go? so that's what I want to talk about this morning. We want to talk about our strategic future.
Oh, okay.
We've been working on how the transition of leadership occurs in our church. I know that all of us have, if we've been a part of church life for any period of time, we all kind of have our own experiences or thoughts about that.
Right.
Our church has a loosely structured policy. I mean, it's enough. There's some tracks there to put the train on.
Right.
But because of the church restructured so much through the last interim, there's really a much smoother pathway to how these decisions are made. And so one of the things that had been occurring in our leadership meetings over the last 6 months or so was just the discussion and sharing information about the reality of what searching for a pastor in the Baptist church looks like now in today's culture. Now, part of that culture is post-COVID. Part of it is something that those who are researching it still can't seem to find put a finger on what exactly is causing this downturn. Some of it could be there are a lot of boomer aged pastors, and the next step for them would be retirement. Mental health issues has become a major concern, and so all these things have worked together to kind of blur the path of actually the normal path that we would take in finding a pastor. And so we no longer have logs in seminary.
Right, that's tragedy.
We no longer have a local association.
Right.
And so the nearest agency we have are seminary at Truett, which is a part of Baylor.
Right.
And then also an area rep who lives in Midland and covers from basically Sweetwater to El Paso and then south.
Oh, that's not a very big area.
Yeah. And so it's plus the fact that there are several Baptist churches in our area right now that are looking for pastors. So in trying to process this in information and things that I'd learned at the annual meeting, and then also reading reports that were published in the Baptist Standard, we started talking about this in deacons meeting. In deacons meeting more than church council, I think.
Right.
But beginning around Labor Day, I wanted us as a church, or our church leadership, to be aware that this was not something that is just automatic anymore.
Right.
And anyways, we kind of continued that conversation from meeting to meeting, and then I retired, made my announcement to them in January, and at that time I said, because I have retired and am available, we can continue to keep things going with me serving in the interim role. And so that's how we kind of got to where we are now.
Right.
And by keeping things running, my basic responsibilities are preaching on Sundays in the rhythm that we've had for 8 years, and then also leading any other special services that might need to take place. And then I write the content and then help you do this podcast every week.
Right.
So anyways.
The landscape has definitely changed. You and I talked about, we were both at Potosi as
Right.
youth ministers at different eras. But I remember Ginger Faircloth over there. She told me that early on, probably 50s, 60s, 70s, they saw themselves as a church where young pastors coming out of Hardin-Simmons could train for 2 years while they're going to school, and then they can go on to the next church. They can go on to a bigger church, whatever. That's just what they saw their role as. That tells you how many were coming out, that they never had a problem. You look at their wall of fame, and every 2 years they had a new pastor, and it was coming out of Hardin-Simmons, and they were helping them and training them. And that's totally changed now.
Well, and another thing that's happened is the financial structure of our church has changed.
Right.
We have, over the last 3 years, continually decreased our budget. And this year feel like we have a solid strategic plan on how we go about budgeting.
Right.
But it's always, now from now on, it'll be based on previous year's giving.
Right.
And so anytime you see a deficit that's reported in our program, that's an indication of we're losing ground. If it's a deficit, that means next year's budget's going to be cut again by that amount.
Right.
And so, because when I came here, we had 3 full-time staff members, a 3/4 time secretary, and now we have you and I were the only full-time,
Right.
and then all the other roles that we have are part-time roles.
Right.
And so, anyways, but that's kind of where we are. And the other thing that I brought to the deacons was that, where our church previously probably could have gotten somebody who's in their second or third church and it's still been a good move for them. Now you're probably finding someone who's coming straight out of youth ministry. And that's, in my network of youth ministers, that has been repeated a number of times.
Right.
Or we've seen that scenario repeated a number of times. And some of them moving into larger churches than this.
Right.
And I think, again, that has to do with the scarcity of people who are looking at being pastors of churches. So
right.
We are fortunate. I think we have a good process and a good way to approach this, but and some good people that we'll have on a committee soon.
Yeah. Two words you said several times: process and strategic. That changes the landscape of what we're doing. Also, I remember just going through that process at previous churches. There wasn't always an outline, because in Baptist life, the church is independent from the denomination. It's that flipped upside down. So there's not a specific outline of, hey, do this, 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 this. A lot of times the church is searching and trying to go, but we do have a strategic process that we're working on.
Well, and two of the things that I brought up to you was, one, have you ever been through an interim where the attendance didn't dip?
No.
And so that's one reality.
Yep.
The second is, if we were to ask our congregation or individuals to guess on how long they thought the interim might be, that would be an interesting number as well, because generally, from what I'm hearing from denominational leaders, is that you're looking at a minimum of 18 months.
Right.
Now, I think because we've been strategic and been taking certain steps on this since last fall, that I think that time will be shortened for us.
Right.
But it's still the current reality of what it looks like for a church to be on this kind of search now.
Yeah.
So, and that was a part of with me maintaining everything, all of the primary roles, except for the office stuff and admin stuff that I did. That way we can continue to capture the momentum we have, and I think lead us into a better place once we find somebody.
And you still doing what you're doing takes a load off of myself and Lisa.
Right. That's, so that's something that, because we don't have a 3/4 time secretary, that stuff falls on us. And so I had a certain role within that. And if I had, that stuff had to be done, and those kinds of things would have to roll over to current staff,
right?
Which means you are add additional stuff to Lisa,
right? So, and that's not fun.
Yeah,
adding more stuff.
Well, and then so again, a part of the strategic piece is that and a part of the hope that I think we will have through the momentum is is the team will be able to focus on the task.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing was, and this I don't think we've said in any place yet, is that we're coming at this from a place of health.
Right. Yeah.
So normally an interim would, when they came in, they would have the responsibility of helping the church clean up certain things that need to be changed or done. Y'all did a deep dive last time, and it has worked.
Right.
And there's a few things probably that ought to be addressed, and the teams will have an opportunity to address those. But you don't really need to bring in someone who's an expert to address those issues.
Yeah, like it was said this week, I don't remember a time that a pastor got a standing ovation when leaving. And at your ministry celebration 2 Sundays ago.
I talked to some of those pastors, and they felt like they got one.
Okay, true. But it was interesting that, that's a sad statement, but I think that a lot of churches are that way, that you don't have a lot of times where you can celebrate a ministry like we're able to, and be able to say, this is a good thing.
Well, I believe it's good for our church, or I wouldn't have done that, and that's kind of been at the forefront of my mind ever since I came over here. But anyways, we wanted to cover, when I first told Teak about this episode, I wanted to make sure that we talked about our strategic future. If you have questions, you can talk to people on church council, and then ultimately through our pastor search team. And so they're developing some good process for them also as they begin to meet. So anyways, we're podcasting early,
right,
prior to your sermon that you're going to be preaching. So again, a part of this transition is we felt like that we needed closure to my tenure, so we had a party, a really good party,
good food,
great food. Then I'll step away for a couple of weeks. You'll take the reins, and then I'll step back in following that, and in the interim pastor role.
Right.
And so there will be Sundays where I'm gone, and we'll have guest speakers come in, and probably people that we've already had come in that are good and reliable for us. But you'll be preaching.
Yeah. So
a Lenten
sermon, one,
yeah.
Which is really fun. We use lectionary for those passages, and talking about Nicodemus, also known as Nick at Night. I told you I was going to use it over and over again.
I've heard him referred to as Nicodemus.
Nicodemus, nice.
Yeah.
I won't. That's never mind. So a lot of what happens in that story that we ignore sometimes is the darkness. Because John plays on dark and light a lot with symbolism, because he's writing not just a gospel but a theology when he writes, and so he uses those symbols to illustrate the spiritual place of the people in the story also. And so going at it from that angle and talking about our own spiritual darkness, because Nicodemus, if he was 70 years old, he was the teacher of Israel, and so he still didn't understand. His religion had clouded his relationship. And so he was in the darkness, and Jesus was that light that he actually knew to go to and to talk to, and it changed his life. And so we're going to talk about that. John 3:16 isn't just for the unbeliever. Right. It's for the believer also.
Well, good. And I'm glad that you're getting to preach a sermon that's in our rhythm.
Yes.
That
is fun.
And we've not done that. You haven't preached a lot, but it's always been meaningful. And by that, Teak and I know that a lot of churches, the only time the youth minister gets to preach is when is on those holidays when very few people are here and the pastor wants to be gone. So
yeah, we call it Youth Minister Sunday.
Yeah.
Usually it's after Christmas, it's after Easter, it's those
Memorial
days
Day
when
weekend.
it's low. Memorial Day weekend, it's the one where everybody's gone.
Yeah.
And the few faithful that are there probably just dread it. But that is, and that's not just us that talk about that. That is a youth ministry commentary that I see in all the groups I'm in on Facebook that are youth ministers. They'll say, "Oh, preaching this Sunday," and then all of a sudden it's boom, 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 120 comments of people saying, "Oh yeah, I'm preaching," because it's common. It's kind of like that. Oh, pastor's going to take a vacation, so let's dump it on the youth minister for that day.
That's so true. Well, I know it'll be great, and our folks will enjoy getting to hear you, and our choir will be singing and things like that. We'll have some.
We'll have sung. Yeah, they will have heard me by the time this drops.
Recording this, yeah. And so that's going to be fun, and glad our church has the opportunity to hear you and to go through that. And thanks for getting us kicked off on the first Lenten message, even though it's the second Sunday of Lent.
Right. And then the next week, or this Sunday, I guess, coming up, you're going to be preaching on the woman at the well, and those two stories, Nicodemus and woman at the well, together are just really cool.
Yeah. So
John did a good job in writing the gospel. I kind of understand why I made it in the Bible.
He's definitely fun to read. Definitely fun to read when it comes his turn to emerge in the lectionary.
Right.
So, anyways, thank you all for joining us for our midweek podcast. Again, if you have any questions about things that are going on, just ask, and Church Council can have some answers for you. We look forward to seeing you with us next Sunday, 10:30 a.m., and you have a great week.
See ya.